Okay, if we could, I'd like to get started. Call this special committee of the whole to order. You've seen the agenda. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, then I'll ask Madam Commissioner Anita Moore to give us an overview with respect to what we'll be discussing today and an introduction of our consulting firm. Madam Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This morning is the statutory public meeting that's a requirement of the Development Charges Act. And by way of background, the staff and the consultants have had a stakeholder session. We had that on June the 4th. And the consultants are here today to present the background study, and that's Jason Bevan and Craig Binning. You've seen them before. And what may be appropriate this morning is for the consultants to do the presentation, and then, Mr. Mayor, you may want to open up the floor to members of the public and interested parties that are here that may wish to speak. And also, I would urge the stakeholder group that if they have not already done so, to fill out one of the notice forms. There's a deputation and further notice request form on the side table here, and in that way we can make sure that we've captured their proper contact information. So then, Mr. Mayor, if you're fine with it, I'd like to ask Jason and Craig to come up and do the PowerPoint presentation.
Perfect. Thank you. Self-introductions, perhaps, for our viewing audience. We're streaming this.
Very good. A pleasure to be before council this morning. So my name. There we go.
Thank you.
Hope you can hear me now. My name is Craig Binning. I'm one of the principal directors at Hemson Consulting, and my colleague Jason Bevan is here with me today. Jason is going to walk us through the presentation, and I just want to stress before we get into the presentation that this is the formal public meeting as is required under the Development Charges Act, and that due and proper notice was given of the meeting, and that the background study and the proposed bylaw have been available in accordance with the legislation again and are available on the town's website. And Jason's now going to walk us through a presentation just to give us an overview of the background study and the rates that we've calculated therein.
Great, thank you, Craig. So just by way of background, Council passed the development charge bylaws in 2009 that have a useful life of 5 years, which is why we're here today updating the various bylaws. The town-wide bylaw expires in August, along with the Northwest Quadrant bylaw. And I'd also note that a former Goldstein-Trinison development area bylaw is proposed to expire, and that's because the area-specific services recovered under that bylaw have now been fully recovered. So the specific expiration date of the two town-wide and Northwest bylaws is August 31st. So in order to continue to collect charges, new bylaws have to be enacted before that date. Now, the Act requires us to do a development forecast, and in the background study, we're forecasting 390 units per year, so 3,900 over the 10-year forecast period. You can see in the unit mix, 1,700 of those units are proposed to be singles or semi-detached dwellings, 700 rows and other multiples, and 1,500 apartments. So you can see going forward, we're going to have a higher percentage of apartments in the future than what the town currently has. In terms of population, we have the town's census, or overall population, going from 81,900 up to 90,600 at the end of the 10-year period. And I note census population might be a little bit less than some of the numbers you're used to looking at in official plan documents because it excludes the undercoverage, which is typically around 4 to 5% in that range. Now, we've also included the population growth in new dwelling units, so that's the population that's going to be in all those 3,900 additional dwelling units, and it's 10,400. And that gap between the 8,700 and the 10,400 results from a decline in occupancies in existing dwelling units. So the actual development charge calculation, that final division at the end of the background study, is using the population growth in new units. However, the funding envelopes are calculated using census population. On the non-residential side of things, we have additional place of work employment. Those are employees who actually work in Newmarket, irrespective of where they live. We have an increasing by 5,700 employees over the 10-year period, and most of that employment is in population-related sector, which is retail, institutional, and work at home. And we also have 1,900 in the employment land category and 800 in major office. Now, what we do is translate that employment forecast into non-residential building space, which is what the development charge for the non-residential sector is based on. So that employment forecast translates into 265,500 additional square meters of gross floor area. The services considered in the background study is largely consistent with the 2009 study, and that includes what we call 100% cost recovery services, and those are services that do not have a statutory 10% discount. It includes fire as well as townwide engineered services, and within that category is roads, water, wastewater, and storm, and that's the town component of water and wastewater, not the region component. And also we have the yards and fleet associated with roads or water and sewer, the engineered services, whereas the fleet for the parks and other 90% services are in the right side of the ledger, in the 90% category. Other 90% services include general government, which is predominantly growth-related studies, recreation, which is indoor and outdoor, as well as municipal parking. Now, the development-related capital program, we've used various servicing plans, secondary plan documents, and input from town staff as the basis of the program. It includes various departmental services, as mentioned before, and all the projects are associated with new development. When all the capital costs, as you'll see in the next slide, have been adjusted in accordance with the DC legislation. So what we do is start with a gross program, which in this case for townwide services is $275 million, and then we're required to make a series of deductions in accordance with the Act. That includes grants and subsidies at $41 million, benefit to existing shares or replacement shares of projects at about $40 million. We have that statutory 10% discount for eligible services, as I mentioned, at just under $10 million. We have existing development charge reserves on hand of $21 million. And then we have shares of projects that exceed the funding envelope or benefit growth beyond 2023, the 10-year horizon. And that $93 million figure includes a share of the Urban Centers Road program that benefits growth beyond 2023, as well as the shares of projects beyond the funding envelope. So overall, that $275 million program is reduced to a $71 million DC eligible share for townwide services. Now, the service levels calculated in the background study and the capital programs result in the following development charge rates. For single and semi-detached units at a townwide level is $21,607. Rows and multiples at $17,139. Large apartments at $13,381, and small apartments at $11,465. And just looking at the pie graph, you'll see that townwide engineered services, recreation facilities, and outdoor recreation are the highest share of the development charge rate. And that's fairly consistent we see in lower tier municipalities across Ontario. It tends to be the roads and engineered services and the recreation services that tend to be the largest part of development charges for residential sector. On the non-residential sector, I'd note that no indoor recreation, outdoor recreation, or library services apply to this sector. So therefore, you see the townwide engineered services piece of the pie is about 75%, or a lion's share of the charge. The non-residential charge per square meter is calculated at $59.56 per square meter of GFA. So the current versus calculated townwide charge is shown in this table on a service-by-service basis. You'll see the charge is increasing, or calculated to increase, from $14,974 up to $21,607. That's a $6,600 increase. And I'd note the predominant reason for that increase is in the townwide engineered services charge. You see that's almost a $6,000 increase, or a 500% increase. So It's more a product of the town's existing charge for townwide services being quite small relative to other GTA municipalities, more so than the calculated charge being exorbitantly high, I would say, and you'll notice that in the rate comparison tables that follow as well. So the overall increase is 44%. The current versus calculated non-residential rate, you'll see the total charge is increasing from $19.70 up to $59.56 per square meter. So it's quite a substantial increase, and again, that's largely driven by the engineered services charge, which is quite small now at $8.40, and now the charge is calculated at $44.44 for engineered services. So I won't go in this table in too much detail, but I just note the Northwest Quadrant Capital Program is slightly lower than the townwide capital program, and that's because neighborhood parks and what we call quadrant-specific water and wastewater services are excluded, and that's because those, as by agreement, those services are to be provided by the developers directly as part of their subdivision approval. So the overall DC eligible share for Northwest Quadrant is $68 million. And that is recovered for in just that individual area of the Northwest Quadrant that is shown in the draft bylaw that has been made available. So the Northwest Quadrant charge for single and semi-detached unit is slightly less, calculated at $20,845. However, the service bundle is largely the same, just with slightly lower numbers in engineered services and outdoor recreation. Calculated Northwest Quadrant charge for the non-residential sector is $57.37, and most of the charge is still made up of engineered services. The calculated single semi-detached unit charge for Northwest Quadrant represents an increase of $8,200, and that's a 64.9% increase. And you can see that increase is more significant than the townwide charge, just resulting from the bundle of future projects required mainly in engineered services. So there's less water and sewer, more roads than was in as a percentage than was in the 09 bylaw. And the increase for the Northwest non-residential charge is $43.65 increase. So the current calculated charge is $57.37, up from $13.72. So overall, reasons for the rate increases, perhaps most importantly, is the integration of the urban center's road network, and we understand the secondary plan is going to council tonight. As the town intensifies, we expect less local or internal infrastructure is going to be required. So as the town moves more from a greenfield community more into an intense community, we're going to see less kind of small-sized local water and sewer and roads required, and we're going to see more projects that benefit multiple developments, particularly the urban center's road network. So it's more of a change. So the overall amount of infrastructure provided by developers might be similar. However, more DC services we think are going to be required in the future compared to local internal services that would be in place by developers and not be paid for through development charges. Another point is we have a significant fire capital program with several new stations planned. And also we know we're recovering for the operations center. And that particular project covers both the, what we call the 100% roads component of that facility as well as the 90% parks component of that facility. So we have a few rate comparison tables and graphs. And we first off note that we're always apprehensive showing these tables because each municipality has a different service bundle, and it always makes comparing one municipality to another a little bit of apples and oranges. However, we're frequently asked, so we do include it just to understand each municipality's position in the greater GTA. So we see Newmarket's calculated charge on the first graph, which is for singles and semi-detached unit. It's the fifth purple-colored line from the top, and the blue lines are the region share of the charge, and the green, and in Newmarket's case purple, share is the lower tier share of the charge. And also some municipalities have area-specific development charges, and we've used just general assumptions, and those are listed in a yellowy orange color. So we see Newmarket's overall charge, including the region and lower tier shares, calculated at $62,358. And that's just below Brampton and just above Aurora. And Brampton's rates have actually now been passed, so they are no longer calculated. They're now in effect, or will be in effect. We'd also note, I'll just flip down to large apartments. The town's calculated charge for large apartments is in a similar position, just below Brampton and above Aurora, fifth down from the top. And you can see the current charge in effect in Aurora is near the bottom, similar to singles. That's third from the bottom. Now, on the non-residential side, we have a retail table, and then we'll have an industrial table. So if we look at Newmarket on the retail side, the calculated charge is second from the top at $468.46. And we'd note that 408, or a large portion of that charge, is the region share. The town share is quite small relative to the region, and that's across all the municipalities on this graph. The current charge for Newmarket is more into the middle at $428.60. Similarly, for industrial, Newmarket is calculated to be above Richmond Hill at the high end of the chart at $268.51 at the top, and the town's current charge is much less at $228.65. But we note that, again, with the region share being $208.95, irrespective of what the area municipalities do, when a developer actually pays a building permit and the development charge on a building permit issuance, the region is the lion's share of the charge. So we just note some policy considerations for council. When we prepared the draft bylaws along with staff, we made several changes to basically align the town's bylaws with the development charge bylaws of the region. So in that regard, single and semi-detached dwellings have been combined into one charge, and this makes the town more consistent, not just with the region, but most other municipalities across the GTA. We've also included the region's stacked townhouse definition, and we've modified the way the apartment charges are calculated from a bedroom approach more to a square footage approach to match the region. And the threshold between a small and large is 650 square feet. Other technical bylaw issues we've changed to match the region include places of worship. We've used 5,000 square feet as the size limit to match the region. We also have an exemption for private schools to match the region. Additionally, temporary use structure, we've used the region's definition on that front. And we've also have a community use or nonprofit exemption in the town's draft bylaws to match the region, and as well as hospital space. Some other important bylaw considerations that we've heard from stakeholders as well includes the rental unit policies, perhaps the town creating a deferral program of development charges. And with that, essentially, a deferral program essentially is extending the time period by which the development charge is paid. So it would technically be the same amount of money received by the town, but just extended over a longer period of time, say 5 to 10 years, something in that range. The theory behind that is that rental units, unlike condominiums, it takes longer for those developers to recoup the capital costs of building those facilities. So there's more of a sensitivity to development charges than, say, a traditional greenfield subdivision or a condominium apartment. Now, we've also heard a lot of feedback on implementation options, and we're going to mention those in subsequent slides. And we'd also be happy to answer any questions from council or the public on any additional policies that haven't already been mentioned in this presentation or in the draft bylaws. So stakeholder feedback to date, and generally that can be separated into two categories, what we'll call overall kind of high-level feedback as well as technical feedback. At the high level, most of the concerns around the magnitude of the rate increase and requests for phasing or prepayment of rates. And specifically, there's been a few comments on just the increase for apartments, given that the town is likely to have more higher density in the future, and apartments are increasing at a similar rate to singles, and in some cases, the rental apartments in particular there's some feedback that it might be hard to pay those development charges at the rates calculated, especially for projects that are kind of well underway. Some of the technical stakeholder feedback. I'm not going to go through all the individual issues, but just a few I've highlighted in this slide. On the indoor recreation inventory side, there was some admin space included in that inventory, so this is one where we would agree to change the calculated development charge rates as a result of that change, and it would be about a $345 decrease to the single and semi-detached charge. So that has not been reflected in the earlier tables. This is something we'd agree to do when the background study is brought back to council in a subsequent meeting. Now there's also some other points where they're more opinion-based. Land values is one. We did some research following the letter received by IBI Group over the weekend, and we think the land values used in the study are reasonable. But we just put a note here, if you were to use the midpoint value, which is between 750,000 per acre and our number of 900,000 per acre, and you reuse that midpoint in the study, it resulted in an $87 decrease, just to give council an order of magnitude of that potential change. Stormwater benefit to existing share, if we were to use the approach in the 2009 DC study that is advocated in the IBI letter, it would result in a $153 decrease in the rates. And we think our value is reasonable, but we just note here we're going to continue to review those points and any others that are received to date. Now this is just a summary of the implementation option that's shown in the staff report, and it involves a transition rate from the current rate up to the full rate, and I won't go through it in too much detail, but I just note that we feel this is a reasonable approach that has been advanced by staff, and it would give the development community some time to adjust to the new rates, and it would also extend the phase-in for the large and small apartments, which we realize there's some sensitivity, particularly with those units as they become a more important part of the town. Now, some alternative phase-in approaches, and I'd note right off the top that any of these approaches would result in revenue losses that would have to be made up through taxes or rate funding, because the Development Charges Act does not allow a municipality to recover any non-statutory exemptions or phase-in lost revenue from development charges. So these three would involve just a longer phase-in, if you will, and these have been used in other municipalities in some cases, but would result in more revenue losses than the phase-in schedule in the staff report. So it could be 1.5 years at a third, 2 years at a quarter, or the transition rate could be extended to 1 year, similar to prepayment, whereas the current approach is less than a year in the staff report. In terms of next steps, we're going to continue to respond to any verbal or written submissions from stakeholders of the public. We could have an additional meeting with stakeholders. A date hasn't been set, but it's something that we'd be willing to do as required. We'll amend the DC study and calculated rates as required. I mentioned that one change we've agreed to right now in the indoor rec inventory specifically. And then we'd bring back a revised rates and background study with amendments to council at a subsequent meeting for consideration. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Thank you. Before we hear deputations that are listed, are there any questions of clarification from members of council? Councillor Sponga, clarification?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got 3 of them. The first one is, more than anything else, is a curiosity, and 2 of them maybe is done. If you could explain 2 first questions. One of them is, the town of Newmarket is approximately 39 square kilometers, and on your non-residential, there's an employment land development, or non-residential, sorry, I shouldn't say development. You identify an additional 265 square kilometers of development. There it is. Is there a breakdown of what is industrial, what is office?
Meters, Joe?
Yeah, so from 265.5 square meters to 265.5 kilometers, same thing.
It's 265,000 square meters of gross floor building space.
Right. And is it broken down by industrial, office?
The Appendix A of the background study contains that, and it's in relation to the employment land is the industrial component, the 1,900 employees, and they have a larger GFA per employee, so it might represent about half of that space.
Okay. And is that, is there areas within the town that those employment areas or that employment development is identified as? Or is just overall within the corridors of the secondary plan? How do you come to that conclusion of what is development, non-residential, and what is residential? That might be easier.
How did they come to the number, Joe?
Right.
For the square meters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So what we have done, this is first of all a 10-year forecast.
Right.
So we're working towards the 2031 numbers that are through the growth plan, then translated to the region, then translated to the town. But perhaps I should answer your first question. Out of the 265,000 square meters, population-related employment is 118,000. Employment land is 122,000 square meters. And major office is 25,000 square meters out of the 265. And that would, all of those numbers would be town-wide numbers. We didn't look specifically at a site-by-site basis.
Okay.
But the employment land would be on all the employment lands throughout the town.
So
That's still big.
where the employment land is located, is that identified in the background study?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no.
Okay. So how do you identify that employment land?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the person who prepared the forecast isn't, first of all, is not here. It's Russell Matthews, done a lot of the work with the region. But what he would do is he would take into account the available land left in the community, just like all the communities in York Region, when developing the forecast, and then apportion it relative to the amount of vacant land available. There is also, I would note, opportunities for intensification of employment land as well, and that's forecast to occur throughout the region. So even though there might not be designated sites that are up on the market for sale that are vacant, there is opportunities for intensification. That would include expansion of industrial and employment land space as well.
The reason why I'm asking, the numbers seems large, a big number, compared to the size of the town, but I get perhaps through the planning department or whatnot, I'll be able to get better clarifications where those employment lands are. The next question I had is, again, can you tell me why the northwest quadrant was pulled out? Is it a specific area-specific development charge, or is it just pulled out for purposes of calculation?
Through you, Mr.
Jason?
Mayor,
Yep, go ahead.
the northwest quadrant has the current agreement in place by which they are responsible for providing their own water and sewer and neighborhood parks. So they pay the same development charge as everybody else, except with those items removed from the calculation. And that's consistent with the town's current.
But it's not an area-specific.
I think
It is calculated as an area-specific
Oh, it is?
charge,
Okay.
but it's follows the same methodology as the townwide charge, with the exception of those categories that are removed.
Two more quick questions. One is you referred to major capital projects within the fire capital plan. If there was a change in the administration of fire services, so from two municipalities to a regional approach, how would that then impact the DCs, or would there be a subsequent study?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've assumed the continuation of the current agreement. I would note that we are $6 million over the funding envelope of $2.4 million. So any change to the arrangement between the town of Newmarket and the town of Aurora would unlikely change the development charge rates, just because the program is so big. So let's say there was more money available from the town of Newmarket, hypothetically, it would unlikely change your rate, and vice versa.
But my last question is on the phase-in. Is there an example somewhere where you would phase in shovel on the ground projects? So where you have an indication that, rather than phase in the DC bylaw, but phase in the bylaw for specific projects that have shown a willingness to actually move forward within a very determined period of time with construction, rather than just, obtaining the zoning and then just sitting on the property.
Jason?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's what the phase-in listed or shown in the staff report has done. It has a transition rate which is based on building permit issuance before March 31st, 2015. So that is intended to basically give that lower rate to people that are more, or developers that are more shovel-ready, and where they've been more likely, perhaps than other developers, or would be more sensitive to a rate increase because they might have built in the old rates or maybe a slight increase in the rates into their pro formas. Whereas developers not expected to build out until, say, 2018 would be more likely to be able to factor in those rate increases into their financial planning.
But for applications that are submitted after January 16, so those applications would not be, after or before, so after March 31st, would you be able to put in place a program, whereas if you knew that they were going to move forward with the construction, you could still defer those, the implementation?
Through the mayor, council has the option to adjust those dates. These are those shown in the staff report, but with respect to phase-in or the timing of that, council has the ability to put in any specific dates they feel are reasonable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bay?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your report and this 175-page document with hundreds and hundreds of tables. So the question I'm asking may be in here, and I've just missed it because it is a fairly dense document. We're looking at perhaps increasing our development charge fairly significantly on the Newmarket portion by about $7,000, or just under $7,000. Do you know what, my first question is, do you know what type of impact, if any at all, that will have on development here in Newmarket? Or are we so desirable that it'll be absorbed and basically passed on? So do we anticipate any impact on the actual rate of development in Newmarket?
Craig, do you want to take that one?
I'll take that one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great.
I think that the magnitude of the increase, we're reflecting that, and I think this transitional proposal through staff is allowing for those applications and those developments that are in the process, because that effectively is going to allow those who are planning to build up to next spring to get their applications in and get permits issued in time for that. So we're allowing for some adjustment for those projects that may be into their business pro forma, and then also with the non-ground related units, the apartments, there's a phase-in schedule because those are longer planning horizons as well. So we're trying to reflect that through that. When we look at the general market throughout the GTA, your charges are still within sort of the medium to the medium high portion of that, reflecting that the region's charges once mostly driving all of that. Most of the academic literature and the quantitative analysis indicates that residential development in growing municipalities is largely insensitive to upfront charges like development charges. So from our perspective as land economists, we don't have a particular concern about the rate in the context of having some transitional provisions that it will fundamentally influence the rate and quantum of development here in the town.
Okay, thank you for that. One more question then. That being the case, that basically development is a bit insensitive to that, that'll go ahead. Anyways, in terms of the phasing in then, so what would be the argument for phasing in if development is insensitive to that?
What we're trying to recognize, and what we heard from the development industry, the stakeholders, is that when they're seeing this kind of magnitude of increase, and they may not have been anticipating this level of an increase in the town's charge, that they will have already done some of their own business planning and pro formas for projects that are to occur soon. And they're asking for some opportunity to get the permits in and pull under the existing regime, which they base their own costing on. And so we're sort of sensitive to that immediate impact on your industry, that we want to reflect that. And once again, especially with the high, the apartment units, whether they're purpose-built rental or whether they're even condominium, those time horizons are longer and it's a trickier market, and so we're trying to give them an additional time frame over which to plan for these kinds of rates. So it's just trying to be sensitive to the industry.
Okay, and I believe that's what the region did last year when it's basically a long warning period when you're speaking of phasing in, saying that in this case I think you're recommending about 7-8 months down the road where they actually become implemented. So it's almost a bit of a warning period for those that whose projects are far enough along that they can take advantage of that and fit into that period of time. And so there really is not a strong argument for the phasing in over 2 years or 3 years. So you're really recommending that shorter period for those that have already started the process in one way or another. Is that correct?
Yes, that's our recommendation with staff as well.
Where they are in the business cycle for
Okay,
the
thank you.
project. Thank you. Regional Councillor?
Thanks very much. It's some comments and questions about the report in general later, but I'll save those for after. Just quick sort of technical questions now. The first one is, I think I heard you say that the town is forecasting several new fire stations. I've certainly heard of discussions of a potential new fire station in the longer term, but I don't know if you wanted to define several for me, or this is not I'm not aware of multiples planned, but.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. In the background study, we have a small, what I'll call small expansion renovation to Station 4-1 here in the town. Secondly, there is a proposed new training facility, which would be in coordination with the town of Aurora. So that would be more of a combined facility. And then in the longer horizon out to 2023, we have a new North Station here in the town.
Okay, so we're talking about one new station and an expansion and a training facility, because I just had not heard of multiple new stations. That was throwing me off a little. And obviously these are all, very subject to time horizons, just including in the DC studies. The other only quick one, and I assume it's a mistake, I was getting very excited about our economic future here in Newmarket. Not that I'm not, but when I read in I think it's page 3 of the report that the town's employment is forecast to grow by approximately 65,900 employees over the next 10 years. I guess my question is, I assume that's an error, because it also says in the highlight that it will fit 5,007 employees over 10 years, unless there's just different ways of measuring, or that was meant to be 2, but even if it was 2, it doesn't match the number. So part of my question is, what does that phrase mean, and where does it match up with the other numbers?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a typo, and the amount of employment forecast is 5,700 over the next 10 years.
Well, that's what I was wondering. It was an odd typo, just because I could have saw if it was 2, but then it would have said 249, and then it says to 65,910. It's just a really odd. I was trying to figure out the nature of the error, but anyway, I could leave it with you, but I'm just curious, because you know what I mean? Like that number is also kind of doesn't line up with any other numbers I could find.
What page is that on, John?
Page 3 of the report.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor DiMuccio?
Good morning, actually. Sorry I'm late. But I just quickly read through your report, and I wanted to touch on something that Councillor Vey had mentioned, and that has to do with I guess the pattern of obviously, I think it's fair to say that you're raising the residential development forecast and the transition. If you can go back to the page that had the transition costs there, yeah, that one just before you're on it. Like that's it. Yes. So what I wanted to is it fair to say, and I'm sure you know that York Region and especially Newmarket has been putting that message out there about affordable housing. That's certainly been a conversation and something that we have, tried to implement. And I'm just wondering, would it be fair to say that with the transition rates that developers will seek out some sort of, that it would affect the cost of housing in Newmarket with these transition rates? Is that a fair thing to say?
Great.
Well, Mr. Mayor, through you, The development of land and the construction industry is a complex one in which there's multiple players. There's those who originally own the land, there's those who acquire the land, there's those who develop the land, there's those who construct the units, and then there's the final purchaser. Changes in costs are borne by different parties in different ways according to academic and economic literature depending upon the market. I'm one who believes that it's really the market that sets the sale price of homes. Clearly these are inputs and that puts pressure on the price, but it can also put pressure on the profit ratios that the various players in that whole stream of stakeholders participate in there. So there is some would suggest, I'm sure the industry, that it's a direct pass-through. Academic literature doesn't always support that. And clearly, there's been jurisdictions in which they've reduced or eliminated development charges, and there hasn't been a corresponding decrease in the sale price of new homes. And so those relationships are often difficult to measure. But fundamentally, it is a contributing factor to the price of new homes.
So then, right, and that, I guess that's my point. I believe I read something about when York Region did increase their development levy charges, and there was some certainly backlash from developers, and basically they almost, not, I don't want to say the word threatened, but they certainly said that that would reflect on the price of homes. So I guess I'm just a little concerned about that. It was more of a comment. If there, and you said it was complex, and there's academic literature, and then there's the reality, but I guess my second question is, if it would fundamentally, as you say, increase the cost of homes, would that fundamentally have an effect, going back to what Councillor Vey said, on the actual development in Newmarket? I mean, would we see, you said it's demand, and I'm just wondering whether people would spend, I don't know, $350,000 on a 800 square foot unit. I mean, I guess that's the question that, I'm just wondering if that would have an effect on the cost and demand. And I know you couldn't really answer that specifically, but I think we might be able to agree that it might have an effect.
Craig?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, you're going to get varying opinions. If we were to go back to the slide that showed the comparator rates across the GTA, if you looked at the municipalities that are typically at the top end of these charts, they are also the ones that typically capture the highest rates of development activity in the GTA. And so that if you were to look at things purely in terms of the level of development charges and the rate of development activity, it's often the ones at the top end of the chart that are attracting much of the development. And when York Region passed through large increases, and when Markham and Vaughan and Richmond Hill have all increased their rates, it has not resulted in a decrease in the amount of development activity occurring in those jurisdictions. And so, to me, that's on the ground kind of things. And it's not like your rates are out of line with the other jurisdictions in which your developers are active, in which residents who are looking to live somewhere in the region, you're sort of in the comparable time in the market. If it's a real concern about affordability at the real affordability level, there are other tools and mechanisms that municipalities have through Planning Act, through the Municipal Act, through community improvement plans, where you can try to make other tools that connect with your planning policies with respect to the levying of fees and charges. And that's, to me, is the more appropriate mechanisms rather than the bluntness of the development charges to try to capture the affordability issue.
Right, and I see that, Newmarket's way down on the scale here, and I can see why. I mean, Markham is right on the, line of Toronto, so I can see why there would be more increase in development and density and building there, and why they would have that demand as opposed to Newmarket, which is, some would argue, a bedroom community. So, anyways, it was just the other. I guess the last thing I want to say, and this is really, I guess my own philosophy, perhaps, but if there was not that demand, if that was a possibility that there wouldn't be that demand, and let's just say that developers decided, we're going to invest in a place like Markham or Mississauga, would that not, and we're talking specifically about Newmarket, I don't personally think you can compare Newmarket to Markham, but we're talking about Newmarket, if there was that, the trend that we would not have as much development because developers would think, well, I'm going to invest, like I said, in elsewhere. Would that not reflect our tax increases? Because as you know, we have, the region has really spent a lot of money on infrastructure. I think we're going on over 10 billion. And that would have to come out of our taxes if not through the development. Is that correct? I mean, this is just a philosophy. This is just something that could possibly happen, but I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Great.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. I mean, you know, as sort of the preamble work to what we were doing, the other two studies that we've been looking at some of these factors about the capital and the expenditures and the long-term financial planning that the town is prudently going through, and we've provided you with some tools to help with that. I'm not sure if the councillor was reflecting upon services and costs that the region has incurred and what impacts they may have to your residents here, or we're focusing here on the town purpose. Presumably, if rates of development here within the town were to fall off, that the response of council and of staff would be to trim back the capital plan projects and manage the spending around what the needs are arising from the rates of development, and hopefully one could do that. And once again, I think this town has been very prudent in the way that it plans its capital in relationship to development. And so I'm of the opinion that one can manage those kinds of shifts and changes, but we don't see any reason demographically to think that Newmarket's rate and quantity of development is going to be less than what is set out in the background study.
Thank you. Councillor Manuel.
Thanks. Just a few comments. I really appreciate the work you both have done, as well as our staff, in supplementing this. But a few comments, partly on this. I think it's this graph itself really demonstrates you know, the impact of DCs on elasticity with respect to development is probably not a huge factor. It's people will move where there's a desire to move, and the market will set the price, et cetera. And that's a philosophical thing too for myself. And there's no doubt that in the developers pro forma, they're setting their house prices, that the DCs are a factor, as any hard costs are. But what I do think the market drives that more as well. I think I share that position of yourself. I do think, though, there is that broader philosophical concern. These DCs capture our infrastructure costs related to growth. And because it's rearview mirror based, we don't actually fully capture the real cost of growth. So it's about finding that balance, and this is what you're tasked with doing. But anything we don't capture through development charges, which are growth related, we're saying to our residents, our current residents, you are paying for growth. And this is a way of saying that new residents have to take their share of growth. If not, if we don't introduce this, it actually causes a spike in taxes. And that, I think, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's wrong, to have current residents paying the cost of new growth. But it's about striking that balance. So I appreciate the work and the research that's been put into this study, because what this does is it says to our current residents, new growth should pay for itself, or as much as we can possibly, without a burden on the current tax base. And I did want to share one comment. There was a question about the fire. Just to point out, fire, JCC hasn't seen, I think Hempson had conversations with fire and our, I forget the company, that's doing the master fire plan review in order to inform this because of timelines. But JCC has not even, we have not even seen, nor have we approved the master fire plan. We're seeing that later in July. But I just wanted to make sure, but we will be reviewing that. And that goes through a council approval process as well, that master fire plan. But what Hempson did was have those conversations so that it didn't also get left out of this review as well, which is important. We don't want to miss the timeline. Final comment is a question, actually. You had earlier the phasing, and I appreciate the importance of phasing. I know that certainly for developers that have already gone to the market selling units and their pro formas to get captured, I think would be unfair. And I know we've got the correspondence specifically from Metris. I know that Paul Bailey, Mosaic Basil Developments had expressed something at the meeting as well. Have they commented specifically on the proposed or the recommended, or do we anticipate getting any of that commentary between now and the council approval?
I can answer that. Through you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of the submissions we received from the development community occurred prior to the staff report being made available, so we expect we might get some comments verbally after this, after our presentation here from the community on that.
No, I appreciate that. And I suspect that what's being proposed, in my cursory review, it would probably largely address those concerns for those that are advanced as far as they are, but would just, I think, benefit, and I'm sure we'd hear from them regardless, from their commentary in advance of council approval. Because I do, in principle, support the notion of phasing, again, for those that have done their pro formas and especially those that have already gone to market on some sales. I think it's appropriate that we try to work collaboratively, but it's also important that we move forward on this so that current residents aren't bearing the cost of new development. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Twinney?
Thank you. Just some questions regarding the comparables to the other communities. Are these some of the communities, have they gone through the process and have an updated DC charges put in place now, or are some of these that are in here, when it says calculated, for example, Richmond Hill or Vaughan, have they done recent studies, or are these comparables to perhaps 5 years ago or whenever they have done their renewal of their DC bylaw? That's my first question. And my second question is, I'm just wondering also, where would East Gwillimbury sit on this chart? We don't have a comparable to that, and with so much actual development going on in that community that's very close to us, just to the north, I thought that would be included as well.
Jason?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. East Gwillimbury is in the process. They just released a background study, I believe, about a month ago. Okay. So they will be updating, and that was oversight on our part. We should have included East Gwillimbury on this chart as well. But again, with the regions charge being similar across, obviously, all the area municipalities, it would probably be, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but it would be in the same type of range as likely yourself in Aurora.
Are you able to get that information to us today?
I can look it up on my phone shortly. But secondly, most of these municipalities have recently updated their development charge bylaws, so that includes Vaughan was last year, Markham last year. Okay. The ones you see, Oakville again last year, Brampton's just got adopted by council last week. Mississauga is going to be adopted shortly.
So they're all fairly recent.
Correct.
And for moving forward in the next period of time.
Correct.
And I'll be honest, I find that the increase is quite a substantial increase, and my concern is the fact that are we pricing ourselves out of the market compared to other communities when we're in Newmarket, whereas Aurora is actually less than us, Vaughan, Richmond Hill, areas to the south, and we're quite a bit further north. And I don't have the right answer, obviously. This is not, something that, yourselves and developers are the ones that are professionals and understand this much more. But my concern would be that, are we putting ourselves in a situation that, one, does it become not as attractive to develop here in Newmarket compared to perhaps some other communities that have lower DC charges? So developers won't develop here, and obviously we're here to encourage it. And just this past Friday, I was at the Make Rental Happen symposium, which we talked about making sure that we have attractive rates, DC rates, say for apartments, proposed apartments in our community. So, now that we're increasing it even further, that's part of my concern as well. So, I guess my question is, what's that fine line, and why, why do we have such a huge percentage jump?
Craig?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, I'll answer that in a general sense, or at least endeavor to. Part of the reason that the increase is that your current charge was lower than many of the jurisdictions. And remember, as Jason indicated in the presentation, what's driving a large share of the increase is the city or the townwide engineering, the roads component within that urban center area, which you have a very strong study to support the need of that as the community is changing, the intensification is going to occur. And Jason was trying to also make the point that as that intensification occurs within the core area, charges or costs that normally would have been borne directly by the developers through their subdivision and site plan agreements is now being pushed up into a development charge recovery. So you have to sort of look at the full spectrum of the kinds of charges that they're being faced with. The other thing is with development charges, you need to recognize that the legislation is quite prescriptive. The charge that falls out from our calculations is a function of the infrastructure planning and the facilities that have been deemed necessary to meet the servicing needs of new development in this community, and we establish the charge. There's nothing under the legislation that obligates this council to implement those fully calculated rates. You can reduce, you can further phase them in, and all of those things. But as one of the councillors indicated, the result of that is that if you're going to continue with that capital program, and you're not going to use development charge monies to fund the full share that you can under the legislation, that foregone development charge revenue has to be met from some other revenue source. And having gone through the exercises with you on your other capital planning and looking at those, what does it fall to? Mostly it's going to be your property taxes. So if you're not going to recover the costs through development charges, those costs are going to need to be recovered against the property tax base in order to implement the capital program that, in the opinion of staff and in ourselves, is necessary to meet the servicing needs of the new development over the next 10 years.
Yeah, and I understand that, but I guess my question is, and it's, again, it's having that crystal ball, having the charges so much increase and so much higher perhaps in some of our communities to the south, or even, I mean, I don't know what where EG stands for. Are we going to discourage development here? And if we do that, then we're not going to have those those charges coming in anyhow. So we will be having to look to the taxpayers to fund our capital projects, say, for example, that we can't, we obviously the corridor, future plans for any fire services, or any other capital projects that the community will need as we move forward. I mean, the Operations Center I know was included as well. So, I mean.
So could I clarify that the capital costs that relate to the development charges would be costs that would be related to the development itself? So in the absence of development, is the argument that you wouldn't be making those investments in the infrastructure?
With all due respect, though, we do have the, the corridor's already in the process, and we do, that's moving forward anyhow, right?
And Mr. Mayor, if I might just make one additional point, to recognize that development charges is just one cost incurred by the industry with respect to delivering housing. One of the most significant components is the cost of land. And as has even been indicated through the submission that we received by the developers through the IBI group, they are illustrating that the cost to acquire land here in the town is lower than that of Aurora and of the more southern municipalities within the region. And that's a major input into their own cost pro formas, is how much they have to spend to acquire the land. And so there's a number of competing factors with respect to how the products are delivered. Working in Markham is just going to be the land's exceptionally expensive. There's more complex planning regimes, the area-specific charges, and so there's a number of factors there that influence that, whereas perhaps delivering a product here has some efficiencies and costs that are incurred in the other jurisdictions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hempin.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation and for creating this document. I had the opportunity to read through it on the weekend, and it's a long read and some very, very interesting information, and it's a real important tool for our community to use. Yes, $63,000, $62,000 is a significant cost to the municipality and DCs, but what I do appreciate is that our capital program of $275.22 million coming forward in 2014 to 2023 is a significant capital expenditure for this community, and us as a council, we have the ability to recuperate through your presentation and your report here of $71 million to this community. And it's very important that we as a council and as a town take every opportunity to recoup our capital costs so that, as has been mentioned before, are not passed along to taxpayers in the future, or current taxpayers, and adding to our tax base. So thank you again.
Thank you. Councillor Sponga.
Yeah, so me get this right. Tell me if I'm, clarify this for me. Tell me if I'm getting this wrong. We've gone through an exercise at the last committee, the special committee of the whole, on the secondary plan, and we made some amendments to phase it in or to put in place some checks and balances to ensure that we have the infrastructure to support the developments as they come forward to this council or they move forward in the town. What this means is that not only do we have those checks and balances in place, but also now what the increases mean that we actually have the money to pay for the infrastructure that is required to support the developments that come forward. Is that correct? And if the developments don't come forward, then we don't need to have those expenditures, that infrastructure investment to support those capitals. Is that
Craig?
in a nutshell?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's the philosophy, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Regional Councillor?
Thanks. The question I'll ask is, my experience with DC reviews at the region and here and a little bit of reading elsewhere, but I'll ask you your experience, which is you've seen many of these and you've sat at tables many like this. I'm going to assume, you can tell me, but I'm going to assume you've heard this kind of debate and conversation about increased DCs and the effect on, will people build or will they stop building, et cetera. I'm going to guess you've heard this many, many times. And have you, in all of the DC reviews you've done with the increases you've done, and even substantial increases in the past, the region elsewhere, seen any evidence afterwards that there was any decline or disappearance of building activity in the region or in the municipality?
Great.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. I mean, it's a complex and difficult question because of the complexity of the kind of market you're dealing with within the construction industry, because it's always a function of demographic patterns, the overall economic environment. We know through the last economic slowdown, the amount of residential development and any development just declined dramatically across all of North America and through much of the world. So there were influences there. With respect to development charges, where we're passing through significant increases or just increases in general, the magnitude, I haven't seen a correlation on the residential side in terms of the rate and quantum of development. And as I indicated earlier, there's been jurisdictions which, through various economic development issues, have decided to eliminate development charges in an effort to try to attract and encourage development, and correspondingly that hasn't transpired. So that the degree to which the development charges can be used as a tool to accelerate or decrease rates of development is questionable on the residential side.
Yeah, and I guess my comment would be if even at the region and a couple times the DC reviews and certainly prior to that, but if every time there's a significant DC review, if we'd chosen not to increase DCs, or let's put it this way, we increased them substantially, the region have in the past, in accordance with the infrastructure work that has to be done. And growth in New York region is it's the third, fourth fastest growing census division in Canada. So the evidence for me isn't there that it stops or slows the development. And I guess if we had have gone the other route, I suspect we would have seen probably similar, not increased, similar growth patterns. But we would have seen a substantial, in my opinion, a substantial increase to property taxes, bearing the burden of that decrease to DC. So it's a debate that's always going to be had. But I find the evidence, the actual empirical evidence, doesn't support the negative impact when DCs are raised.
Thank you. Councillor Demuccio?
Thank you. Actually, you said something that was interesting just now when Regional Councillor John Taylor asked you if they have an impact, DC rates. And I believe they do. And you can see on your chart, I forgot to mention it earlier, Toronto is at the very lowest. And we all know Toronto has the lowest DC charges. But the reason that the philosophy there is you have them lower and people and investors will come and develop. So to say that, that it hasn't transpired on the effect of lowering charges, I think it's fairly common to a philosophy to think if you lower your DC charges, you will have more development. I mean, that's a no-brainer. So it does have very much an effect. And in a place like Newmarket, I know that if you were to ask many people here what attracted them to Newmarket, it was in fact that the real estate was cheaper here. And they were willing to travel a little bit more north to get to work, the commute. Now, I know you have a chart here about jobs. My own principle is that government doesn't create jobs, the market does. And I think in this situation, anytime you make something Like in this situation, you've got a higher DC charge, and there will be an impact on development. That's what I think, because we're in Newmarket, we're on the northern side, it will have an impact. That's just my own feeling. So I don't know if, I mean, this is a great discussion we're having, and I think that there's good comments made on both sides of the philosophy, but that's just my own.
Thank you. Councillor Emanuel, then I'd like to get to the deputations if we could.
Thanks, yeah. And I think, in my mind, I mean, when you've got Markham, Mississauga, Oakville, Brampton ahead of us, I don't think anyone would argue there's a dearth of development in those communities. And like you said, this is one component. I'm sure the developers would love it to be lower. Of course, any cost side of your pro forma, you'd like to be lower. But I would suspect, you even look at those 4 jurisdictions, the cost of land is considerably more. But also their ability to sell and the price. There's so many factors in a pro forma. I think the DC component is not the biggest. In fact, it's a smaller driver on, I think land, for instance, is a bigger driver on the cost. But I will say, this absolutely is about philosophy. These numbers are arrived at through looking at our capital plan going forward. It has to be empirically based. We know we're going to be incurring growth-related costs in our capital plan. These reflect that. In front of us is 2 choices. One is you support the notion that growth should pay for growth, or the other side of the coin, frankly, is that you support current taxpayers paying increased taxes to pay for that growth. It's literally, there's 2 sides to that coin. Frankly, with the little land we have left in town, I don't think, certainly in greenfield development, it's not going to, the elasticity is not going to be a factor. So it's literally, there are 2 sides to the coin. And there's a lot of philosophies around the table, but that's one that probably any even economist would probably agree with. It's someone's paying for growth. It's either captured by the new development or it's captured by the current property taxpayers. So that's the philosophical question in front of us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I wonder if we might just take a 10-minute break and then we'll hear our deputations. Okay, so if we'll be back at about, say, 20 after 11, and then we'll hear our deputations. Okay, thank you. All right, let's see. Thank you. Okay, if I could, members of committee would take their seats, please. We'll invite deputations, go into the public portion of this public meeting. I do have one deputation request listed, and that's Mr. Daniel Burholtz with Green and Rose Developments. Mr. Burholtz, if you could come forward, please, and we permit up to 5 minutes for deputations. And we've asked our consultants, Jason and Craig, to join us over here so that they might be in a position to respond if we need to respond directly to some of the questions raised. So, Mr. Burholtz, if you would, please.
Hi. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Council and staff. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I debated over the weekend after taking a look at the report to Council as to whether or not it made sense to actually continue with my deputation. And although I feel like the work done by the staff and the consultants in terms of deferring and not deferring, but transitioning in and phasing in the DCs is definitely a step in the right direction. I felt like I wanted to still come and talk to you specifically about rental development because that is why we came to Newmarket, and that's why we're in Newmarket. My organization doesn't have any land holdings in Newmarket. Actually, the only last land holding we had was through a partnership where we actually converted 260 Davis Drive from a rental apartment building to a condo. So we were here 10 years ago doing the exact opposite of what we're doing today. And one of the things that we learned from our rental conversion to condo days is that we actually are, we'd like to be in a business of creating rental as opposed to taking rental away. And so the reason we're here today is, the reason I'm here today is to talk to you about a couple items that have nothing to do with the phase-in, because I think the phase-in is moving in the right direction, although we do want to take some time to analyze the phase-in and decide and get back to staff on whether or not we think the dates are appropriate and whether they work for our pilot project on Davis Drive. So one of the things that I saw in some of the council questions that I thought was interesting is that the council was asking whether or not this will impact the developer's decision to choose Newmarket to develop. And I think that Craig answered the question. I agreed with his answers. I agreed with the councillor's answers in that, yes, in the historical examples, none of which were rental development. Yes, I think in general growth has continued to plow along irrespective of DC increases. I don't know if anybody has any data to reflect that same growth when it comes to rental because there has been no rental in Newmarket or anywhere in York Region for the last 30 years. What we're trying to do is change that. And we're trying to do it one project at a time. So we have this pilot project, and I can't, we do appreciate the support we've received at the council level so far. In last November, we appreciate the support we've received from the local councillor, the regional councillor, staff, and the region itself. And so I don't want to stir the pot, and that's why I was concerned about bringing anything up today. But I do want to say that a couple things. We believe that one of the tweaks that was made in particular was the change of the size from the large apartment down to the small apartment, change the size of units from 700 square feet to 650 square feet, which was in line with what the region implemented just last week. And that will have an impact on the types of units available to Newmarket residents in the future in high-density living situations. We feel, in particular in rental, that's important because when you buy off plans as an investor in the southern municipalities in York Region, like Richmond Hill, Vaughan, and Markham, a lot of people who are buying these small units are investors who are going to rent them, but the renters don't actually see the units on purchase. They actually, once it's built, they buy. But once they see the units, they're just the renters. The people who actually are purchasing the units are people who are purchasing off plans. When you're building purpose-built rental, it's a different situation, and people actually see the units. And we want to be able to provide units that are large enough not only for couples and move-down seniors or empty nesters, but potentially even for smaller families. And in general, up here, unit sizes are bigger, and there hasn't been this big condo boom up here. So we're just concerned that simply blindly following the regional model for unit sizes may not be applicable for the northern areas of York Region at this time, like Newmarket. So the suggestion to council is to consider whether or not it would be appropriate for Newmarket to maintain the larger unit size. The same thing happened in Mississauga recently. Hempson did the study. They originally had their two-bedroom, their large units at about 745 or 750 square feet. Hempson came in and they suggested moving it down to 645 square feet. And what ended up happening is, through discussions like we're having today, the council decided to increase it up to 700 square feet, which seemed to be more appropriate. So we believe for a rental purpose, that would be an appropriate size of unit, more for the small unit. So we asked council and staff to consider maybe separating themselves from the rest of the region, because Newmarket is unique. It is not a southern municipality, and they don't have the condo development. And none of the municipalities have rental development, so that's sort of, there is no evidence for that. So that's point one. The second point I wanted to make is that, give me 1 second, let me just, oh, okay, so this, and it's just a general, it's also on this, on the topic of rental development. I asked Craig this over the break. Is there evidence? Because in my letter I said that we would like you to consider possibly having a specific category for rental development, if you believe that rental development is something you want to see here in Newmarket. And you are at the forefront of this. We had this seminar on Friday that Councillor Twinney was mentioning earlier, and Councillor Taylor was there, and I believe other councillors may have been there as well. There's no development. In Newmarket's, this pilot project we're talking about here was at front and center, and Newmarket is thought of in the region as a leader of rental development, which I think is a positive. And in order to continue that, making a decision potentially to create a rental category within your own development charge bylaw that would allow developers like us to come up here and have an incentive to choose Newmarket to do rental development would be something that we'd ask you to consider. We haven't fully analyzed technically the impact of that on how the rest of the infrastructure dollars will be collected and how that will impact property taxes, because the money, if you're choosing to do the infrastructure development that you're going to do, the money's going to have to come from somewhere, and I think Craig had mentioned that, and I think you all understand that. But at the same time, if you want rental to happen here, we have one project, and we do believe that the phase-in that's allowed should protect the ability for us to continue on along those lines. So we believe that's positive, but ultimately, from a rental perspective, we would like to make those two requests: consider lowering the unit size and consider creating a separate category that would have potentially what, ideally, when we were presented on Friday, the City of Vancouver came in and explained their incentive program for rental development, and they have a very aggressive and a lot of positive results. Thousands of units have been created through what they call the Rental 100 program, and that is actually a waiver of development charges. Now, I'm not here asking for that today. I'll come back when we can do a CIP or something along those lines for the Davis Drive corridor, but they did have a positive experience by modifying DCs for rental with a guarantee that that unit would be a rental unit forever. That was the contingency. It was a 60-year covenant on title that it has to remain rental. So I had to have a lot of other different things to say if I was coming here as a developer in general about the magnitude of the DCs, and I think I agree with a lot of what you said about how are we going to scare off developers, but I'm not going to talk about that today, because really my focus is simply rental development and how we can make rental development happen in Newmarket.
Thank you. Questions of clarification? Councillor Hempin?
Thank you, and thank you for your deputation and bringing some points forward. And I thank you for that. The town does, as you're aware, the town does offer some incentives for the corridor development in the deferral of the DCs, and I believe your company will be taking advantage of that. You did partially answer my question, I think possibly, in that you've mentioned a covenant around a total non-payment of a DC for a covenant of 60 years for a non-conversion. My question is regarding your space that you're taking today in this pilot project that you're doing. You mentioned that 10 years ago you did a conversion of rental to condo, and my question is have you made a commitment to this municipality that that rental will not change and a conversion will not take place?
So the compromise that was made at council was that these units that we're building will be committed to rental for 20 years, and we're not paying $1 less of the DCs than any other development. So in Vancouver, they don't pay a penny, and they commit for 60 years. We're paying 100% of the DCs, but we're committing for 20 years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Regional Councillor?
Thanks. My question actually is just to to our consultants. And the question is there any evidence that the occupancy or the use of space is different for rental than for condo? You see what I mean? Like, any argument for a different DC rate through the way the piece of property is used, or?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. We don't have any evidence to suggest that the occupancy patterns are fundamentally different between a purpose-built rental unit and any other type of dwelling unit within the same type of built form. Recognize, in Toronto, many of what are referred to as condominium ownership are actually end up being rental units through the rental market. And that's the important correlation under the development charges. We need to make a connection between the demand for services arising from a built form. And so if one was to want to create a special category of unit for purpose-built rentals and reduce the rate that would be applicable to them, in my opinion, that would require a reduction, and that reduction would be foregone development charge revenue. We couldn't spread it out over the other development charge type of units, and therefore it would have to be funded from the property tax base or other revenue sources.
Are you aware of any studies that have been done into that topic? Because if there was a study, then you could. I don't know. Can you spread it out if there's actually I would assume no. But you would justifiably have a lower rate if there was empirical evidence that the use was different or lower than, or less impactful.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. If there was empirical evidence to show either a lower occupancy pattern to purpose-built rental units, or that in some way they placed a lower demand on certain types of municipal services, then theoretically one could calculate a differentiated rate for that type of unit. I'm not aware of any charge that contains that kind of analysis, but point made earlier by the deputant is that we haven't really dealt with purpose-built rental in the GTA for an awful long time, and we're starting to experience it now. It was an issue that came up in the City of Toronto, and they're going away and studying and examining the role of development charges in purpose-built rental, and I believe they struck a committee to do that. And so recognizing it is a different time of business pro forma, it's just going to take some time to appreciate how to mirror that with development charges and other planning issues.
So I guess the statement I'd make in response to Daniel's comments would be that one area in particular, and I guess we had the Make Rental Happen symposium on Friday, and it was an incredibly informative day. And the one thing, though, that came up more through casual conversation with staff is that one of the issues we're facing is in our attempt to create affordable housing of all types, and certainly through rental, and this speaks directly to the unit size, 650 split, that the region has, and we're discovering this more and more as we go along. But that what staff is predicting, particularly in our housing staff, are predicting is a shortfall or a greater shortfall of affordable family units, and it really is a challenge. There's really fewer and fewer options for that circumstance, and that speaks to this issue and the size of unit that we could start driving. We will. I mean, I'm sure we will start driving smaller units, and then they're less. That means less likely to be available to families looking for full family looking for affordability. So that's my concern with that square footage, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this rethought by municipalities over time.
Thank you, Councillor Sponga.
Along the same line as regional councillor to you, Mr. Mayor, the question is both from Mr. Berholtz and Hampson. Considering that, and understand how we're taking the regional approach to align ourselves with the region, but I think one of the points that was made earlier in the presentation by Hampson was that Newmarket now is out of greenfield development. We're moving into this phase of vertical development. It's a brand new phase, really. If you were to take away some of the projects, I guess, on Davis Drive at Callaghan there, but other than that, really, it's all single-family dwellings or that type of residential product. Considering that this is a new product for Newmarket, the vertical build, and it becomes also an option now, not necessarily just for new residents to Newmarket or single professional or smaller nucleus family or so forth, but have we looked at a market, and you've mentioned how a lot of this is deemed by demographics, by markets, and so forth. If we looked at instances where municipalities are just engaging into vertical development and higher density, where that new residential product is being introduced, whether you find more buy-in from the empty nesters rather than the single professional, and hence the need for a larger unit that accommodates extended family and so forth. And is that something that might just drive, not just on the rental side, but on the condo side, increasing that unit size?
Mr. Berholtz?
Sorry, Councillor Sponga, can you clarify the
What's the
question? for me?
question?
The question being that because it's a new housing product,
Yeah.
apartments, on a vertical scale, not basements, vertical scale, and that it might very much become a product that attracts not just a single professional like it might in the southern part of the municipality, but it might attract the empty nester.
Yes.
And has there any analysis, has there been any analysis made on the market analysis, the requirements of the empty nesters in terms of size? And I would suspect it's much greater than a single professional. So from the 650 square foot, you're
We're summarizing the question here,
Yeah,
Joe.
I got it. Okay, I just wanted to
Got
make
it?
sure. So it's really, it's contrasting. Is it
You got it.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
apologize for not picking it up the first time. So you're basically contrasting the needs of an empty nester versus a single professional younger. And I think that from our perspective, we have found, we've done some retirement homes, or not retirement homes, but senior homes before, and we have found that, with people with large homes downsizing, that they do have requirements for larger, and they can afford larger units. And so we do, our independent work has guided us to believe that, empty nesters would probably have larger space needs than singles, if that's what you're asking. Is that answering your question?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's in our, we haven't done any studies per se. I don't have any empirical evidence, but we, in general, we do believe that
Okay,
that
so
would be the case.
the next part of the question was, so considering that this would be a brand-new housing product in Newmarket, to Hanson, is there then, have we done the proper demographic and market study in terms of that 600 square feet unit, where perhaps Newmarket there might be larger units that are required because it's such a new product and we have a lot of empty nesters,
Craig?
as opposed to a lot of single professionals?
Craig?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. The 600, the recommendation to move to the 650 is really to create alignment with the region's bylaw, to allow for the transparency and the ease and consistency in the application of the two bylaws, so that when someone comes in with to build a product, they know that if they've got a unit at 650 square or 750 square feet, it's treated and deemed the same both under the region's bylaw and the town's bylaw. The other area municipalities have moved to that approach as well. With respect to the occupancy patterns of apartment units, the work that we're doing in other municipalities, largely further to the south, where they've experienced higher rates of these types of units, Markham, Mississauga, City of Toronto, and the 2011 census data has shown that the occupancy rates of the smaller dwelling units has gone up. So even though as units have come down in size, the occupancies have gone up. So we saw a shift in the 2011 census to higher occupancy patterns for apartments category across the board, and even within the smaller units, those occupancies have gone up. And so I think it's a cautious moving forward, but as I indicated, the 650 here is really in alignment with the region.
Thank you. Councillor Kerwin, for clarification, please.
First of all, Daniel, I've sat through you, Mr. Mayor, through your presentation of Green and Rose rental apartment units, and I support it 100%. I mean, that's basically what we need is purpose-based rental, and you're to be complimented. I was here when we did 260 Davis Drive. It was built at a condominium, but you converted to rental because the town asked you to do that, and we gave you incentives to do that. And once the 10-year period was over, you had no difficulty selling those rental units back to condominiums, and there's fantastic renovations in 260. But the bottom line is, we know we've always had problems with ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Basically, for every one conformity ADU, we probably have 4 that aren't. And so I look forward to your project. And Newmarket has always lacked rental accommodation, legal rental accommodation in apartments. And I'm well aware of the fact that there hasn't been any apartments built across the GTA recently for literally decades. I know Murray Kornblum personally of Trivest, and it's a lose-lose situation, really. Those who are holding on to apartments in Toronto have lost money, and they're moving elsewhere. So we're lucky to have you here, and I compliment you, and I thank you, and we should be doing everything possible to assist in providing our residents with rental. And just as our representatives from Hempson have said, in Toronto, there are units that are renting out at 250 square feet, houses which have been converted into maybe, say, 7 units in that one house, 250 square feet. But it's what a person can afford, and that's about a $700 a month. And when you think of the people who are employed in the retail section of convenience foods and so forth, that's basically all they can afford. So it's shifting, and I agree with you totally. The number of occupancies in smaller units has gone up. I know that for a fact. But thank you so much for your presentation, and I'm looking forward to someday to have those rental apartments available for people who live in Newmarket.
Thank you. Councillor DiMuccio.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. You did touch on something, or you said something that was
Yeah, we're having a little technical difficulty.
I can hear you.
You did say something that caught my attention, and that was, I agree with you. You're right when you had said that many investors are the ones that buy the individual condo units, and then they rent to potential renters. And I think this is very common in big cities like Toronto or Markham, and the reason why is because there's a big demand because of jobs and because it's a big metropolis community. But I think that to say that Newmarket is, we're going to have that same market, I completely disagree, and I know that some people here might not agree with me. But the point is, people that are buying condos in Newmarket units, I don't necessarily think they may be investors, but I think that it's going to be more attracted to seniors or people that want to downsize, smaller families. Those are the sort of people that will buy into those condos, not necessarily investors. Because if I was an investor and I'd say, well, you know what, Newmarket, why would I invest in buying condos there? Because it's a small community. It's there's not a lot of it's not a big city, so it's a very different buyer, and I think that has to be part of that conversation here, is to compare that to investors in big cities like Toronto or Markham Vaughan. Very different animals there. So I just wanted to make that comment. So that was good that you said that I agree.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
Can I just...
We'll receive the deputants and the presentation shortly after. If there's any other deputations, is there anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Please come forward, give us your name and address, and provide us with your comments. And we do limit up to 5 minutes, if we could. And I'm aware that we do have a 12 o'clock meeting as well.
My name is Frank Orsi. My company is New Era Homes. My address is P.O. Box 215, Newmarket, Ontario. We are building the land at Yonge Street and Clear Meadow. I have about 90 units left, zoned R2. And as I look at this this report that's here before me, I'm not going to get into philosophical debate. You people will do this later on. One thing I do see is that singles and semis are being categorized into the same category and being charged the same DC rate. R1 singles being very large items, 2-car garage, which is very sought after, and the other builders in town charging huge premiums for this product, are now going to have the same DC charge as the small little R2 units. This seems to be very out of disproportion because the small little R2 units, which have single-car garage and are so almost like a discount compared to the premium R1, doesn't seem fair. If I want to make a recommendation, I'd recommend that for the town of Newmarket, keep what they were going with in line with having singles at one rate and semis, or singles at R1 at one rate, and all the other ones in R2 at a different rate. Just like I see in R4, the townhomes is at another rate again.
Okay. Maybe I could defer that question over to Craig in terms of the philosophy there.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. The vast majority of the development charge bylaws across the province create treat singles and semi-detached units as one category of unit. When establishing the occupancy pattern for them, we combined the two to come up with a blended rate. Most of the census data illustrates that there isn't a significant difference between the occupancy patterns of the single detached units and the semi-detached units, and therefore, in our opinion, they create a similar demand on municipal services, and it's consistent with the region and with the other area municipalities, and that's the reason, the rationale for combining them into one unit type.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Orsi?
Could I respond? Oh, that's like saying healthcare, everybody should be being charged the same amount. But in our Income Tax Act, we have the marginal tax brackets where the more you make, the more you pay. If the tax rates for each home is based on the real estate value of the property, I'm hoping that we can have the DCs more in line with the actual value of that home at the end of the day, and having that rate at the same, more or less in line.
I appreciate your point, but I believe that's been responded to in terms of usage patterns, and that's really what drives our capital requirements. Any additional final comments, Craig?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. It's an important distinction under the Development Charges Act. It's what we refer to as a benefits received kind of fiscal tool. And it's fundamental under the Act that we have to create a relationship between the demand for services arising from the particular category of use and the associated infrastructure needs. We are not permitted under the legislation to give consideration to ability to pay kinds of issues. So there's some jurisdictions, sometimes I get asked, well, can we have an exceptionally high development charge for properties that are worth more than $1 million? In our opinion, that's not permitted or defensible under the Development Charges Act to create a relationship between the value of the home. It has to be based on the demand for services.
Thank you. Any other items? Now, Councillor DiMuccio. Councillor Muccio?
In all fairness, though, I can understand Mr. Orsi's point. When you had mentioned the demands on services, to say that a single-car garage versus a two-car garage would not have a demand of services is wrong, and I'll tell you why. We are now looking at a lot of these developments, and they're getting smaller, they're shrinking. We have single-car garages, and yet we still have people using 1.2 cars per family. So, whenever we have smaller homes and smaller, garages, we are in fact using more services, because many people today, and I know this because every year we host the regional council, I believe, hosts like a recycling thing, and people are using their garages for recycling, because we've lowered some of those services. We don't have as much of the pickup services as we used to. We've really shrunk a lot of that. So as we shrink our subdivisions and our homes, we are going to impact the services of the municipality. So that's where I wanted to put my comment that I don't agree with.
Thank you. But I do think you're in agreement. Any other points you wish to raise, Mr. Orsi?
Yes, I was just hoping to speak out towards affordability and the proportionality that the larger homes can afford the larger DC charge than the smaller ones, because at the end of the day, development does not occur in a vacuum. I'm competing against Markham, I'm competing against other townships, and it takes a lot to get the people from Markham to come up here. I have to give them a lot of benefits and incentives to come up to Newmarket, especially.
I think that question's been answered in terms of affordability and how that's not permitted. I believe that question's been answered. Any other items?
No, nothing new.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the development charge bylaw? Yes, sir. Name and address.
Chris Bovick, the Forest Group, and I'll fill out that sheet and hand it in, that new sheet form that you have. 590 Alden Road, Suite 211 in Markham. I sent in written comments based on the stakeholders meeting that was a few weeks back. I definitely echo and agree with Daniel's comments, both in his letter and what he presented today. I will have further comments and look forward to that opportunity to provide them through to the consultant. And there was a suggestion made by the consultant today to host another stakeholders meeting. Based on the comments that have come forward, myself, Daniel, and others, I do feel that would be a good route to go and allow the development community to further provide some input based on what they have presented today. Again, what I saw in the staff report and what was presented today, the development community, I don't feel, has had the fullness of time to review that. And in a stakeholders meeting, we might be able to provide some more value-added comments to help formalize that further. It definitely is a step in the right direction, pertinent to the phasing. I did have some other comments in my letter that have not been addressed that we could further discuss in that session, again, before it comes back to the committee for their consideration.
Okay. Thank you. And I see that the recommendations in this report is that we receive the comments and that staff will be reporting back to us July to finalize the development charges report. So between now and then, Madam Commissioner, is there any opportunities for additional dialogue there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we had a conversation with the consultants, and they're quite willing to host another stakeholder meeting. So we will attempt to arrange that in the very near future. We will have to give some notice on it, and it is our hope that Council is still able to adopt the finalized DC bylaw in July. Now, the bylaws, as you've heard earlier this morning, they do expire at the end of August. There is one more opportunity. You do have a committee of the whole meeting in August. We could bring it, if we find our timelines are too tight, we could bring it to that meeting, and you would have to have a special council meeting to adopt it. But if you'll leave that with us, we can certainly try and make it work for the July 21st time frame.
Okay, thank you. That would be the preferred approach if we could accomplish that and still accommodate the issues that are raised. Are there any other deputations or motion to receive the these deputations, the presentation, as well as correspondence that has been distributed? Okay, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Emmanuel. And before I go forward, Madam Commissioner.
Mr. Mayor, I also wanted to just to mention that was staff and the consultants in the right area when we brought to you the preferred option for transition and phase-in? Because that is important to us to know more or less where members of council stand with that, so that when the final report does come back to you, we have a sense that council is in agreement with that sort of situation. So I would appreciate that feedback.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Emmanuel?
On that, I think that's, in looking at it, it's something I think that makes sense. But I think that's the one area where we'd probably benefit from some of the commentary from the development community, because they're obviously impacted on that. So on the surface, it makes sense, and I appreciate the approach to try and capture some of their initial comments. I wouldn't mind hearing. I know there were two that spoke. I attended the meeting. There were at least two that spoke. We've had some correspondence. They probably haven't had a chance to review this schedule, so that would be great feedback to get from them as well. But this, in my mind, seems to address it on the surface.
Thank you. Regional Councillor.
So I'll start with that topic. I support the direction that's being proposed for phasing, and I think it's really important that we're that we're moving forward, and we have to do it in a timely manner. But I think this and it speaks to the concern about the consultation, et cetera. But this does allow a level of fairness, and I think we have to be seen as a corporation that's fair. And there's people that have frankly sold homes based upon a current regime and a current financial model, and I think to try to find a way to address that in a way that seems responsible and fair, and I think is appropriate, and it's not at all uncommon throughout I think the GTA. The one thing I would say though is when you do, and we did have some tricky times with this, the region, the notification is important for DC review, and there's statutory requirements, but the notification when you engage in phasing becomes even more important. And so I'm not sure how we're reaching out or making sure that everyone's aware of this. But I have to tell you, when we did it at the region, I heard from some people who said, well, I'm not sure we heard about this. They were pretty big developers. They're part of Build. I thought, well, I don't know how you didn't. But then I heard from somebody who was building one or two houses or their own house, and they had no idea, and I would have come and I would have pulled my building permit if I had known. So I really worry that, and how do you get to some of those smaller ones and make sure that fairness opportunities provided? So I guess for starters, have we, to this point, or are we, as anybody who's literally been to the desk, certainly through a pre-consult, but been to the desk on any form of development in town, are they all automatic? Do we have a database, and has that been notified through the process, and will be, if not, I mean, I think we need to.
Madam Commissioner?
Mr. Mayor, we have, through the planning department, they have been helping us through our circulations. So they have a contact list in the development community, and we have been circulating to that list and to Build, as well as the statutory requirements, which are newspaper notifications. But I would have to defer to Mr. Nethery. He may be able to tell you whether they include the smaller developers as well.
Yep. Mr. Nethery, if you could come down.
And while you're coming down, Rick, I'm just thinking also, for just an example, we've got a person who's moving forward on I think it's a 16-unit rental building on Queen Street, and again, you know, especially with rental and this, and not being a large, you know, it's I think a first-time developer, probably pretty sensitive to that pricing model. So,
Mr. Nethery.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the short answer is yes. We're trying to do our best to get all of those folks, including the one that you've just mentioned, and I think they were included in that wide distribution that the Commissioner referenced. I guess the only one that you never know is the guy who we haven't met yet,
right.
You know?
No, that's fair.
Or the gal. So we have to be mindful of that, and it might even be you know, something that we'd want to put on the town's website, or even notices on our counter, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
If you thought that was helpful.
If I can add to Rick, the other thing I think is sometimes sometimes I see the postings we do and their statutory approach. We've done it all the time, but sometimes they can be a little bureaucratic, and or lack of a better word, or very technocratic, and you see them and you just kind of glaze over almost. I mean, I think it'd be nice to say something. You know, are you looking at building, or you know, in the next 6 to 12 months in the town of Newmarket, you should be aware that DCs are going up. Like something that just says it, right? And then the information can be later or below, but just a very simple message that grabs people's attention.
Thank you. Madam Commissioner.
In our review of what others have been doing, I've certainly seen those types of flyers, just a very simple message, and we'd certainly be glad to get communications involved to help us develop something that can be available at the various counters and posted online as well.
Thanks.
Okay.
I have a question, but not on that topic, but for our consultants again. It was discussed earlier, and your explanation was.
Maybe before we do that, let's take a vote on receiving this, and then we can have the question. Okay. All those in favor of the receiving what? Receiving the presentations, the deputations, and the correspondence. All those in favor? That is carried. Question now, John. Sorry.
No problem. The question I had is, your explanation was very good about, you know, how you can allocate according to the Act, you know, not according to value, but according to use, et cetera. I've always been curious, and it's my chance to ask the question, that have there ever been studies done, or any jurisdiction that's ever approached DCs from a pure square footage formula, just square footage times X?
Craig?
On residential.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. It's my understanding that the District of Muskoka in this current round is exploring doing just that. I think I have not examined what it's done. It's not a client of ours. In the town of the Blue Mountains, we differentiate the residential charge by GFA, so it's not by built form, but rather by the size of the unit. That's largely reflective of the uniqueness of the type of development that occurs in the town of the Blue Mountains. And we did try to, through doing that, we looked at the relationship of occupancy patterns by size of unit. So I'm not aware of any jurisdiction other than this district in Muskoka where the residential is set like the non-res, or it's a charge per square foot or per square meter. And I think that there's potentially some data limitations and challenges that might present.
And so it's something, doing the research you're not in the position at this point to suggest a recommendation about why you would think that would be a good direction or not a good direction?
I can indicate a potential weakness that I see, that if we're looking at, say, a ground-related single or semi-detached unit, There's nothing in the census data that shows that the occupancy pattern shifts significantly whether the unit is 1,500 square feet, 2,500 square feet, or 5,000 square feet. And so for most of the services certainly that are being recovered through your bylaw, there really is that relationship between the general location of development, but mostly about the amount of persons in that particular dwelling unit. And that's the way we set the charges.
And one last technical question, and I have to ask it also because it's come up recently involving rental, another development. But are we still treating, how do we define apartment vis-a-vis stacked townhomes? There was a recent circumstance where someone, the gentleman that's not here, but on Queen Street, he had put forward a proposal that basically was a rental apartment building, but because it was stacked townhomes, and it didn't have a central hallway with doors as opposed to exterior doors, he's had a substantially larger DC charge, and it seemed like an odd distinction to make. And are we changing that, or what's the rationale for keeping it?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to probably turn this over to Jason because he was looking at that definition within the bylaw. It's generally an issue that's come up largely in the GTA, and part of it is these new types of built forms at that sort of medium density level, depending upon their nature of them. Census Canada even classifies them differently, whether they're apartments or whether they fall into the category of a medium density townhouse type of row. And we've been exploring and looking at the occupancy patterns, but I know this is one of the things that we're aligning ourselves with the region, so I'll let Jason add further clarification.
Jason.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. We've mirrored the region's definition on that issue. The specific definition is in the draft bylaw, and it is, I can just read it quickly, means a building other than a plex, townhouse, or apartment building containing at least 3 dwelling units, each dwelling unit being separated from the other vertically and or horizontally, and each dwelling unit having an entrance to grade shared with no more than 3 other units. So that particular unit would be charged the row or other multiple dwelling unit charge.
I got to tell you, I think the mayor's anxious to move on, so I'll leave it for a future discussion. But I really would like more information back on this one. Having sort of dug deep onto one building, there's just no way I could possibly make sense of the fairness of that application, and consistent with the region or not. It just completely defied logic for me. It was basically because he had doors on the outside as opposed to the inside hallway. He had a substantially higher DC rate vis-a-vis the town row. And it didn't seem to reflect usage, size, anything that I could see. So I would love to, if there's no more context can be provided now, I would like to, before we finalize this, get a greater understanding of our options there, because it just didn't seem right.
Thank you. Councillor Emanuel.
Just a question, and I'm happy to move a recommendation. Is it staff's contention that we would not be able to have the stakeholder consultation within the window permitting the July 21st approval?
Commissioner Moore?
Mr. Mayor, there probably is. I just needed some time to consult with Hempson to make sure they're available to set a date. And so we will go on the premise that we are still staying with the July 21st schedule.
So I will move the recommendations. I don't think we need to include, I think it could be staff direction, the notion of the stakeholder consultation. So I'll just move the recommendations as is, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Kerwin. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. It would be appropriate then to have a motion to adjourn this public meeting. Councillor Emanuel, seconded by Councillor Vague. All those in favor? That is carried. We should take a 15-minute break and we'll get into our next meeting. Thank you. Yeah.